sitting here today in the home of Pearl Offers Wood Greebon, and my name is Martha Herden, and I'm part of the oral history interviewing project of the Blanco Library. Our goal is to find as many of the older citizens of Blanco who have probably the best memories of Blanco, and to just sit down with them and to talk and to find out what they can tell us about this special town that we live in called Blanco. Pearl, can you tell me what year you were born and where?
I was born October the 7th, 1913 in Blanco, Texas, right almost on the city square. My father and mother had moved here from Fredericksburg. All of my grandparents came from Germany, and my father and mother settled in Fredericksburg, but then they moved to Blanco and in about 1911, 10 or 11.
Do you recall what part of Germany that your ancestors came from?
No, I don't really know.
Okay.
I have it in the book, but I don't know where they came from. I really don't.
In the house that you were born in, I believe you were telling me that is right it was across from the old nursing home, right there off the square. Am I correct?
It's right next to the old nursing home.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
And now we know that as the Arts Center.
Yes.
So that house has gone from having babies in it to having art in it.
It's gone along. It's changed a lot.
What can you tell me about some of the changes that you remember?
Oh, I really don't. I don't really remember anything from the time I lived there, because my mother and father moved somewhere else, I guess, because I don't remember living there, mm-hmm. but I know I was born there.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had 7.
7.
4 boys and 4 girls.
And where do you fall in that line?
Well, the older ones were Alfred and Edgar and Lydia and Marie, Jean, and then me, and then I had a little sister who passed away when she was about 14 months old, and then Leroy was born in 1919. That was our 4 boys and 4 girls.
Are you the remaining living of your siblings?
I am the remaining,
wow.
Only one living, yes. And
as a little girl in Blanco, what was there to do?
Oh my goodness, I really don't know. We played a lot of dominoes. I can't remember learning to play 42. We were big people. We were home people. We stayed at home most of the time. We didn't go anywhere much, except I went to church. I went to Sunday school when I was 2 years old. I have a card that I got from my Sunday school teacher when I was 2 years old. But we really just played games like dominoes and checkers, and later we played jacks and things like that. There was nothing much to do, mm-hmm. except entertain yourself.
What can you tell me about the way that you can remember the town at that time looking?
Oh my, it was very small. The first I remember, it was very small, and of course we had no electricity. Everything was wells and rainwater tanks for our water supply, and everybody could own a cow and a calf and a pig and chickens in town. You could have those, and the cows ran free all over town if they wanted to. Yes. So everybody had yard fences, and everything was fenced to keep the cows out because they had to go to the river to drink. Nobody watered their animals at home. They were all, the cows went to the river.
So it sounds like that even in your early years that water was as precious as it is right now.
It was. Most people had just a tin cistern on a tank, on a pedestal, or a windmill or something. The house that I was born in had an old windmill and a well, a good well. And that's the only water system we had. And of course, no indoor plumbing at all.
Just outhouses.
Outhouses, that's right.
Can you recall any big floods in Blanco?
Oh, well, yes, I remember several big floods, but really the biggest ones was, I believe, in 1952 or 57. That washed out the bridges, and we had two of them, and one in 52, and I believe the other in 57. I can't remember.
You mentioned to me about the fact that there was no electricity there for a while, and so I'm gathering you did everything by lantern or coal oil lamps.
Yeah, coal oil lamps.
Is there something special? Can you tell me about when electricity arrived?
If I remember correctly, Texas Power and Light Company brought in electricity just from some other place by wire. Just brought it in and put it in the houses, and my dad read meters. Then later, in about 1924 or 5 or somewhere along there, they built the old power plant.
Where was that located?
Right on the corner of Elm and 3rd, next to the mill and gin. So my dad worked at the power plant. He ran it until LCRA came in, till they built the dams, and Lyndon Johnson was in office, some office. I don't know if it was the president or
he was moving up.
Senator or whatever
yes,
he was. But he would get up in the mornings early, 5:30 or 6 o'clock, and walk up to the power plant. We just lived 2 blocks from it. Walk to the power plant and turn the power up, because everybody'd be getting up. And he'd turn the power up. He'd come home and milk the cow and feed the pigs, and then have breakfast, and he'd go back to the power plant and come home at lunch, and at 6 o'clock in the evening he'd come home for supper, and then he'd go back to the power plant. And he had friends that came in and played dominoes with him. There was only room for 2 people to play dominoes, so the men would come and play dominoes with Dad till 10 o'clock, and he'd turn the power down.
Was it turned completely off?
No, it never went off.
Never went off.
But he would turn it down. And it made everybody in town, you could hear it all over town, just put, 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 put. And once in a while it'd catch on fire, and then it'd go real fast, put, 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 put. And that, no matter what time of the night it was, everybody would wake up when that power, or in our family, would wake up, and they had the power plants on fire, and I don't know where it burned. I don't know anything about it because I didn't go. But Dad would get up, dress, and go up to the power plant and stay until it burned out, whatever it was burning.
He had a very important job.
And then he'd come back sometime and go back to bed. But he did that for many years until until the LCRA came in and built the line.
You must have been very proud of your father.
Well, he's a pretty smart guy.
Yes, ma'am.
He could do lots of things. He was a carpenter. He could carpenter, and I know for many years he fixed shoes, half-soled shoes, but they had to be a certain kind that he could sew the shoes on. And I remember him sitting at night before he went to work at the power plant and fixed shoes. And then he ran the gin. He was a manager of the gin as long as there was one.
Mm-hmm.
People grew up raising cotton. Well, the gin was torn down, and the nursing home was built there.
Where did you go to school at, Pearl?
Blanco, always. First school I went to, I think the school building, I think must have been a 2-story, about like it is, well, not now, but had 6 rooms up and had an upstairs. And one year I went to school in what is now the Sunset Inn. I guess the whole school was moved because they were tearing it. It was condemned, I think, because it had burned, and it was condemned, and they couldn't have school there, so they tore it all down except the bell tower, which is the same one that's on it now,
yes,
on the
ma'am.
old building. And then the 3rd grade, I was back in school, in the high school, in the school building up there. And I went there. The 4th year, we moved to Fredericksburg. I hated it.
Why?
Every minute.
Why?
I just hated it.
Miss Blanco?
I missed Blanco. I missed my friends, and although I had some good friends there too, made some good friends that one year, but they talked German, and I didn't. I never learned. My older brothers and sisters learned to speak German. Mm-hmm. But when I was born, well, you didn't dare speak German.
Why?
Well, because the war was going on, and with
yes.
Germany, and you didn't dare. You didn't even want to say you were German because you were pretty well ostracized if you were German.
So that I don't miss this in asking it, did any of your siblings, your brothers, go to war?
No, none of my brothers did. My 2 older brothers were married. The
Mm-hmm.
other one was too young.
Right.
The next one was too young because I had 2 sisters in there. Then,
do you recall a time when part of the town square burned?
yes, I remember when it burned. I think it burned twice. I think once but I don't remember that time. But then it burned. I remember when it burned, when all the west side square of the square burned. The buildings all burned. They have had a bucket brigade came from the mill, and Jen had a good well on it and a electric pump at that time, and they formed 2 lines and tried to keep it down, but it
Wasn't going to happen.
Burned, no. Several up as far as the Masonic building. The 2-story building. Mm-hmm. We always called it Masonic building.
Well, with your memories of Blanco, I would say it's pretty sure that you remember the courthouse quite a bit.
I remember.
Well, why don't you share some of that with us?
Well, I don't know where.
Was there any time that there was? I know that it's been a hospital.
It was
and
a
school.
Hospital. And for a long time, all of the graduation exercises and everything were upstairs in the auditorium in there, and there was also a silent movie, of course, in there at one time.
How much did it cost to go see the silent movie?
Oh my, I don't remember. I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sure not more than 10 or 15 cents.
Probably not. Money came hard, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And they had an old player piano, and we took turns playing that player piano, and when something excited happened, we'd really go fast and hard, and when it slowed down, we'd slow down, you know. It was, but you had to read it. But
You were mentioning to me earlier when we were first meeting that there was a museum in the courthouse at one time.
It was a wonderful museum.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
A Mr. Hawes was from England, and he came in here and bought the Sunset Inn. I don't remember what it was now, but he put in a cafe and a liquor, sold liquor. And he rented the courthouse, and he put a museum, and you went in the front door, and you could go through, and they had a old barber shop in there with wax figures in it. You want me to say what I could?
Sure.
And had an old man sitting in the bathtub, and a man cutting another man's hair, and as you walked up to the door, he had a ray some way that turned on a speaker, and as you walked up to the front door, well, they were talking like the barbershop talk. And then you went on around, and he had it all divided into small rooms, but never took out any of the real walls. I think he did tear down one staircase. And then he had Judge Roy Bean in there, and he was talking to somebody about murdering somebody, and his voice would come on as you walked up to the door. And then when you went on around there was an old kitchen, and it had all kind of old utensils and churn and wood stove and all the kind of things that an old-fashioned kitchen had. And then there was a funeral parlor, and had 2 coffins in there with wax figures lying in them.
They didn't talk.
No.
Good.
They didn't talk. They didn't say nothing.
They didn't say anything.
They didn't say anything to us. And then they had the bank was in there, and still had, and used the bank vault that at one time the Blanco National Bank was in that building, and the vault was still in there, and they used it, and they had a banker in there, and then you came out the front door. Mm-hmm. Nothing was damaged, but Mr. Hawes built a big concrete slab for a dance hall on the south corner, and had a big wood fence around it, and he hired good bands to come, but he couldn't make any money out of it. And something happened, he went broke, and he left, and most of the stuff, or a lot of the stuff that was in there, was loaned to him by other people. Mm-hmm. So they came and got it.
They came and took
out of
it.
the museum, and so it was dissolved, which was a terrible thing, because it would have been a money-making proposition nowadays.
When you heard about the courthouse, that it was going to be torn down and moved out of Blanco, what did you think about that?
Well, we were all devastated, of course, but I didn't know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. They started having different things and they still do, I think, have something, and a barbecue or some kind of celebration every year. I think they still have fundraisers for it.
Well, let me ask you, do you recall, or have you heard about the reason that the courthouse seat left Blanco and went to Johnson City?
Well, I don't know. They had, I've heard they had 4 elections, 4 times to vote on it, and every time Blanco won until the last one, and then it was moved to Johnson City. But the reason I think that it was really moved was because way back in history, long years ago, 2 or 3 counties were formed out of Blanco County,
Right.
which made Blanco, the city of Blanco, not be the center of the county, and that's the reason one reason that they wanted to move it, because Johnson City was closer to that. But I think they went out and beat the bushes and caught everybody they could possibly catch to vote.
To get that done.
To get that done.
Right. I wanted to kind of go back a little bit. When I'd ask you about any of your brothers being in the war, did you have a brother that was in World War II?
Yes, Leroy, the brother that's just younger than me, was in World War II. Mm-hmm. Well, my husband was in World War II. He was in the infantry. J.C. Wood was in the infantry. And all of my boys were in the service. All 4 of my boys were in the service.
Tell me a little bit about that, Pearl, how that was for you as a wife and as a mother.
Pretty hard, I'll tell you for sure. Because when my husband went in, we had 4 children at the time. And, of course, I got money. They sent me money, but it was a hard time for everybody, because you were worried all the time, and my husband was in the infantry, and he was in Europe, in Germany and France, and was with the 95th Division. I think they were instrumental partly with the taking of Berlin. And he had quite a few close calls and experiences. But one thing, he just before they were to cross the Rhine River, they were in a beautiful home. He sent me some pictures of the home that they were in. He said it was so cold. He said they burned the piano and the most beautiful furniture he ever saw. Said they just burned it in the fireplace because they were so cold they had to have heat. Mm. And a bomb hit pretty close, and he had his shoes and his false teeth laying in the window, and he lost his false teeth and lost one shoe. I don't know how he got him another one. I don't know how. He never said how he got the other one. But before he came home, they made him some new teeth. So.
Well, so that I don't miss this, who did you marry when you got married?
Which time?
First time. First time.
J.C. Wood, right. James Carr Wood.
And you and Mr. Woods had 4 children.
We had 5 children.
Can you name them for me?
Did we have 5? Yeah, we had Mary Ann, James Eugene, Benny Lee, John. I have to think about that because we had a lady living with my mother, and she called him John Henry before he was born, and half the time we called him John Henry, but his name's John Franklin. And Gary Lynn.
That's it?
After the war. Okay. Gary Lynn was born.
When your husband was in the war, did you work outside the home?
No. No, I never had work then. Okay. I didn't start until after he came back from the war.
Can you tell me about, was there any place in Blanco that you did do some work at?
Oh, I worked at the bowling alley off and on, off and on. I'd work there and then I'd get another job and I'd work there. Let's see, I worked for Vista. I worked for the federal government for 2 years with the Vista as a Vista volunteer, and I worked that two years.
What did you do?
Oh, I took people to the doctors. We didn't have a doctor here at the time, and I'd take people to the doctor, take them shopping, take them wherever they need to go. I drove them around mostly.
Mm.
But I stayed, at the time I was, Elsie Beck had a quilt shop in town. They made quilts. And she owned what is now the Uptown Theater building, Uptown Cafe building,
Mm-hmm.
and she owned that. So she put up a quilting frame. She had some quilts, and she got a bunch of scraps, and she and I would go to San Antonio and buy material, and we'd make quilts. And one of our favorite quilts was called Texas Star, and the quilt would cover one star, big, colorful star.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a picture of that. And then she would sell them, and the ladies in town would come and quilt. And we had, about 10, I guess, or 12 people that would come and quilt every day, women. And Elsie paid them, I don't know, 15 cents or 25 cents an hour or something like that. But they were women that didn't have any husbands, most of them. Some of them had husbands, but most of them were widows. And that gave them a place to go, and they could sit and talk. If they wanted to quilt, they could quilt, if they could quilt. And then she would sell those quilts. And we sold a lot of that Texas Star quilt for $750. And then at lunch she would cook. Maybe she'd get a chicken and make chicken and dumplings, or she would cook some kind of a meal, and they would all eat, and about 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock they'd close shop and go. And once a month she had a domino party for everybody. Everybody came, played 42, and the ones that had husbands came, and they'd have 5 or 6 tables of dominoes and play dominoes all afternoon. And it was a wonderful thing, and it was wonderful for the women. And even though they only made 10 or 15 or 25, I can't remember what she paid them, because I stayed there. And Mr. Jake Pickle helped her out a lot with that. And she would pay those women. Sometimes they'd get $3 or $4, and they were just as tickled. But we'd get down there some mornings at 8 o'clock, and they'd be waiting for us, for her to come open up the doors. And it was a good thing.
It was good companionship.
It was good companionship. It gave them women. Most of them were widows. It gave them, and the ones that didn't would come in the afternoons. If they couldn't come in the morning, they'd come in the afternoon. And she kept all their time down in a book. She had a book that she kept exactly what time they came, and Saturdays or Fridays she'd pay them off, and it was such a nice thing to have.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, as I listen to you talk, that people helped each other out, and it's just the way it was.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you and I kind of share in common, even though we haven't met, you used to go around to a place called the Coke Place. KOCH, and that's the place that my husband and I are living at now.
Yes.
And I would like it if you could share just a few memories of being around the Kochs with me.
Well, they had cows, and we bought when we didn't have cow, when my sister would come from Austin, we'd always go up to Miss Koch's and buy sweet cream. We loved cream instead of butter. We really preferred cream and jelly on our bread rather than butter and jelly. And Mom and Dad went to church with Mr. and Ms. Koch a long time when they had to go down to Little Blanco to go to the Lutheran church. There was none in Blanco, and they were Lutherans, and they went down there to church. But one thing, at that time, the church from the Methodist, the land from the Methodist church on down past where the Park House is, was our field, and we lived in the house there on that land. Bethke's the house now, and the house across the street was Mr. Leisman's house, and from the Catholic Church was not there, and from there on up to CJ's and all those places, that was all oak field, and Mr. Leisman had that all planted in oats, and then the Koch place that you live, where you live, that was all, that whole block was in, or two or whatever it is, was in oats. And in the fall, or whenever the oats were cut, and I can't remember, I was thinking the other day, I don't remember how they cut the oats, and if they cut it and tied it up or shocked it up, or if they just cut it and put it in wagons. The farmers around would bring their wagon and teams, and they'd haul that oats from our field and the Leisman field up to Mr. Koch's field where y'all live, just south of the house. It's where the thrasher would sit, and they would thrash the oats and put it in sacks, and all the people that owned the land, them and the horses and teams that they brought in to haul the oats up there, all of those men would eat lunch there, and the women all met at Miss Koch's house. She had a big kitchen, and the women would cook dinner, and the men would come in and eat lunch, and the kids would play in the yard and have a good time. That was a big time when all the kids got together, and we played hide and seek and everything in the yard. That was always good. We always looked forward to that because we knew that was going to be a good time. But can you recall, and I'm sure you can, knowing Texas, where there were periods of a severe drought? Oh yes, lots of times when didn't have any water. One year when we lived there and had a 1,500 gallon cistern, tin tank out of the house. That's all the water we had. And we had to haul water from up where Darcy Smith lives. There was a spring, a good spring there on the north side of the river. And everybody in town hauled their water from there, from that spring. There was none. I don't know how we lived.
Well, you just lived. Can you tell me, through your married years, when you begin to see, what was some of the first big things that changed in Blanco that you can recall? That maybe a business coming to town or anything in particular like that?
Oh, I don't remember any. Well, I know that we used to have a new Ford, and Mr. Coke, not the Coke that lived there, but Mr. Albert Coke had a garage there where next to the bowling alley there, and every year he'd get a new Ford car in there. We couldn't wait till Mr. Coke got his new car so we could see the new Ford. Or his was a Ford dealership, and Mr. Ernest Stubbs had a Chevrolet dealership. So we always had new cars, but
so it was kept like a big surprise right until he revealed the...
Yeah, until he sold the new cars off. But I don't know when that stopped either. I don't remember. But one thing that we all looked forward to was a medicine show.
A medicine show?
A medicine show. It came to town every summer. And they had a truck, and they would park it between where the Mill Nursing Home is now and that house. They would park it in there, and they'd open up all the back of the truck was back of the truck was a stage, and they'd have medicine that you took would cure everything.
Did it?
From a sore toe to, I don't know. I don't think we ever bought any of it. I don't know. But I don't ever remember seeing it. But they had that, and they had an ointment they sold, and I guess the medicine maybe was 50 cents a bottle. I have no idea. I don't remember, because I don't remember ever buying any. And, I mean, I was too young to buy it, but I was still a kid. But, and then they sold candy boxes, little boxes of candy, and I guess they were a nickel. And every time you bought something for a nickel or a dime, you got a vote, and vote on the prettiest girl or the nicest girl or the best looking girl, and they gave away a diamond ring at the end of the medicine show. Usually lasts a week or 10 days, something like that, every night. And they'd put on little skits, or they'd have somebody playing, singing or dancing or something. They'd put on a pretty good show, and of course sold their medicine. And Pearl Byers nearly won the ring every year, because she worked at the telephone office.
Uh-huh.
And everybody knew her. You came to town.
So she was going to get it.
She was the only one that everybody knew.
Uh-huh.
That all the strangers that came in knew. And so she'd get the pearl. I think maybe Ruby won it the last time. The last medicine show they had down where Hollis Boatwright lives now.
And where would that be?
Well, it's down 4th Street, closer to the bridge. Close to the bridge, next to the Kellum House. And it was there, but it didn't do very good. And that's the last one I remember that they ever had in Blanco. But that was something we all looked forward to in the summertime. And swimming. We went swimming. But we didn't have any place to swim. You could get out there and paddle around and be in the water, but we didn't have any place big enough to swim because there were no dams.
Uh-huh. Pearl, what's your fondest memory as a, let's say, a young married woman of Blanco?
Oh my fondest memory, I don't know. Times were so hard, we didn't have many fond memories, I'll tell you. Mm-hmm. I couldn't say. Okay. I can't say. My kids, I guess as a young married woman, I was proud.
Proud of your children?
I was proud of my daughter, because she was little red-headed girl, and she was cute as she could be, and I made all her clothes, and I made them just, they were the right length, and they were everything. She was just a cute little girl. My oldest brother lived with us for a while. They worked at the they worked for Otis Elevator Company in Austin. They put their first job was putting the lights in the University Tower. That was the first job they worked on. And my brother was living with us, and we'd rented an apartment together, and he'd come home in the evening, and she'd say, "Gum, gum." And he says, "Oh, my goodness, I forgot to get your gum. Come on, we better go get some." And he'd take her off, I don't know, to a beer joint, I guess, probably. I don't know. Anyway, take her off to some place where there were some guys, and everybody was crazy about Mary Ann. And she was my pride and joy. Always has been.
If you could have a wish for the future of Blanco, what do you think you'd wish for Blanco?
I would wish for Blanco well, I don't know. I do wish they could get the courthouse paid for. That one thing I wish for, that it would be secure. I want it to stay here. But I really don't know. I think we've got a wonderful school system. I think it's good. I think we have we have the church situation is nice. It's everybody really seems to get along pretty good. There's not much. You don't hear of many things, people fussing or griping about things. I don't know. I think it's just kind of a nice little country town. I hope it stays that way.
Do you think we'll ever become something the size of Fredericksburg?
Yes.
You do?
I sure do.
Okay.
I sure do. I think we are. Many years ago, Mr. Summers had a drugstore here. He owned a building or something, and he had a sign up over the front of what is now the hardware, the Rosebud, isn't it? Cafe.
The Redbud, yes, ma'am.
Redbud.
Redbud, you're doing fine.
And he had a sign up over the front of it, and it said 3,960 or some five or six numbers, San Pedro Avenue, up on the front of the hardware store. And I think that's coming that way. Of course, it's not the 281 highway anymore, so it won't be San Pedro Avenue, because that's the other highway. But I think we'll be bigger. I think we'll grow. I think we'll grow too much.
You do. Hopefully we will not lose.
I won't live to see it, but I think we will live to. I think it will grow.
Well, hopefully, as you described Blanco, we'll still keep that friendly, down-home flavor that we have.
Right. I think so. I think because when anyone is sick or anybody dies, it seems that people step forward and help them, financially as well as otherwise. So I think maybe it will, but so far as growing, I think it will grow.
Well, this is something that I always ask somebody who's up in age. I'd like to hear what you consider are some of your secrets to have living a long life. Anything you can tell me that you think you might share?
Well, I don't know. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. I don't drink. I've never drank. And I certainly have Well, I don't know. I know that one thing, when we were young, when we were kids, we played outside. We were outside all the time. We were sitting on the steps playing jacks, or we were jumping rope, or we were playing Annie over the house and with a ball, and we were doing something outside all the time, which I think is the worst thing can happen, is for kids to sit in the house and with their heads in that computer all the time. I think that's bad.
Yes, ma'am.
I think people should be more aware of what they're doing to their children by not making them get out into the air and playing and having fun, instead of sitting there with these dumb things running around on the screen or something.
Well, and I was going to mention to you also that you've passed on your caring of your community to, it sounds like, to all of your children. I know that, which one of your children is a county commissioner?
John. He was justice of peace for 12 or 15 years.
And now he's county commissioner.
Now he's county commissioner.
And you're proud of him.
Well, sure.
Good.
And Gary is retired. He doesn't work anymore. My son in California was worked for United Airlines. Wasn't a pilot, but he worked for United Airlines. Mechanic.
Well, Pearl, I think that you are a treasure for Blanco.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And you've shared some wonderful memories with us today. My wish for you is that I'm back talking to you when you're 100 years old.
Well, maybe so. Maybe so.
Thank you, Pearl. It's been a pleasure to interview you today, and God bless. Miss Pearl, who is this picture of, please?
This is Emma Koch and Robert Jonas. She worked for my mother when my mother and father ran the telephone office. She worked for them. And this is made at the home of Mr. and Ms. Herndon.
And this was where Mr. and Mrs. Koch raised their 7 children. Okay, just a minute.
Now, what is that?
Okay, this is the picture where there is a fence around the courthouse.
Oh.
Is this you standing in front of it?
Yes, that's me standing there in the gate.
Okay.
Courthouse.
Anything about that memory you can tell me?
I guess I was about 5 years old. That's when we lived at the telephone office.
There was a fence that went all the way around the courthouse.
All the way around the courthouse like this, yeah. Because the cows came to town.
Tell me what you mean.
The cows were loose. In the daytime, everybody turned the cows out. They could go wherever they wanted to.
Uh-huh.
Of course, they didn't come up to town very often, but
every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And did you tell me that, I'm going to move this out of the way, did you tell me, Miss Pearl, that your mother and father ran the telephone company for a bit? Yes,
from about 1918, or I guess, because Leroy was born there.
Uh-huh.
My youngest brother was born there. And they ran the telephone office. And this Emma Koch and another lady came to work for my mother and father and ran the telephone office after my 2 sisters moved to Austin. I guess Mama did it part of the time, like at 6 o'clock or something, and open it up. Otherwise, they were not supposed to ring after 10 or before a certain time. Well, that was just the law that you didn't call. They didn't have to keep it open. It was available at all time, but they didn't have to sit there at it after 10.
And can you recall about when you would make a phone call, when you would crank the phone, like what were the rings? How was that done?
Well, at first, the first building, the first machine they had to ring like a long and then a little short or whatever on the number, but they'd ring, well, you'd have to, a little drop would fall down and you had to stick your plug in there and then talk to them, and they give you the number, and like, I want to talk to so-and-so, and they didn't, most of the time they didn't know the ring or anything, they just asked for a person.
Right.
And you had to know the ring. Then they got it where you just have to push a button forward or backward to ring instead of having to crank it. And that was the last machine that they had. What is that?
This is a picture of the Blanco gin. The gin that was.
And she said that a while ago, and I didn't even remember having that picture.
Okay. Do you remember the gin?
Oh yeah, I remember the gin.
What can you tell me about it?
Well, the front building in the front was originally a flour mill, and my dad. Evidently, they raised wheat here in Blanco. Not that I can remember of it. But when my daddy bought the mill, it had in the front was the flour mill, and they made flour. And my mother made the sacks that the flour went in on that old machine that's sitting right back there in the corner. My dad bought that machine for her. And so it's older than I am.
We're going to have to take a picture of that
machine, and she made, and then he pasted his address on it, his brand on it, Blanco Flour Mill.
Oh, the nursing home still has some of the walls of the old gin.
They left just one, I think, is all.
All right.
Maybe more.
And that was Dr. J.B. Price, who was the grandfather of Roaring Cage. And as we go into some of the photo here, he is shown mounted on his horse.
Yeah. Right out in front of there, in the middle of the street, was a big grove of oak trees. Right in the middle of the street.
Really?
In front of there, yeah. And behind there, behind this mill, immediately behind it was a most wonderful well. You just could pump forever, and it would just keep good fresh water, good water. Well, on this side of there was the boiler, and it had used the poles were like 6 or 8 feet long that they stuck in there to make the steam to run the gin. And the gin was in back of that, and they had about I don't know, they had several places where you could see the cotton going by, and then where at the end where they pressed it in those big bales.
Right.
And then they rolled it out on a porch and then put it on a wagon and took it across the street there where those houses are, and where the beauty shop, and I believe there's a chiropractor office or whatever. Anyway, those buildings where they are, that was the cotton gin, and that's where they'd take the cotton and put it, and they'd eventually take it to wherever it was made into material.
Okay. Have any memory as to how the tradition got started of playing dominoes at the bowling alley?
How that started, I don't know. As long as I can remember, they've had a table or two back there that they played dominoes. Generally, the men came and played in the morning.
Pretty early?
Would be in the mornings, yeah, usually. But at one time, there was a group of men from Louisiana, and they were hunters. And at that time, most of them ate at the cafe. And they formed a club, domino club, and they would play the Blanco people. The Blanco men would play these hunters, And if they had a trophy, they'd stay for like 2 weeks or so, and they'd play every night.
Wow.
And if the Louisiana bunch won, they took the trophy to Louisiana. They brought it back the next year, and they'd play. If Blanco won, they kept it here.
Kept it in Blanco. Good.
And that was
Good.
I was working at the cafe at the time.
I bet there were some heated games.
That was some heated games. They played dominoes.
I bet it was.
Played.
Miss Pearl, what is this a picture of?
This is a picture of my father, who ran the power plant for 10 years. He got a pin from the Texas Power and Light Company for 10 years service. And he would get up in the morning to turn the power up, and then at night when he'd come home at 10 o'clock, he stayed till 10 o'clock every night, and he'd turn the power down after everybody went to sleep, after supposed to have been asleep at 10 o'clock, most everybody anyway.
He kept some long hours.
And he took, and he made $50 a month.
Doing that?
Working 7 days a week, and from 5 o'clock in the morning till 10 at night.
Wow.